I'm here with Jodie Comer, Sandra Oh, Fiona Shaw, and writer Suzanne Heathcote in a virtual manner, but we are all here with you out there in the world. We've got about an hour to talk, and I'm going to include some questions that you've all sent in, so I'm going to crack on. The only thing I would say before we start is that the final episode of Series 3 has been out on iPlayer since Monday, but it's not coming out on BBC One until Sunday. So if you haven't seen it, we are going to put some spoilers in. So you might want to occasionally go la 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 la. Sorry about that. Okay. So I'm going to start. I'm going to start with Jodie. Jodie, I want you to rewind. We've had 3 series, all right? But I want you to rewind. Okay, rewind right back to the beginning. And it's just because we've spanned so much. I wanted you to see if you can remember what it was like pre-Villanelle, because we can't really remember. Can you remember? Can you remember doing the audition for Villanelle? And did you think you'd got it?
Oh God, by no means thought I'd got it. Well, I had 2 auditions. I had my initial audition, which was on my own, and that was in a small office in London. And then I had a recall with Sandra, which was actually really wonderful. And I know we've spoken a lot about this, Sandra, but I flew to LA from a music festival. I got a phone call when I was at a music festival that I had a recall, so beers got put down very quickly. And I flew to LA to do my audition with Sandra, and I remember it was the huge scene from episode 5 of season 1 where they meet in Eve's house, and it was amazing. I remember I got there and Sandra had gotten all the props there. It was quite a physical scene. There was a lot of different elements to it, and it very much felt like a workshop in a way that we worked through the scenes and just played around with it and just kind of like bounced off each other. And I remember leaving and thinking I was very at peace with if I hadn't have gotten it. I knew it was a great experience of the day, and we actually found so much in the room. I knew I couldn't have done any more than what we'd found, really. So I kind of left it quite content, but then it was like a 2-week wait to find if I got the part or not. So that was,
you couldn't be content then.
Yeah, no, that very quickly went out the window. But it was a great experience, the audition, and I think that's hugely down to Sandra's approach and how much she gave me on the day.
And have you found, as the 2 of you have worked together through these 3 series, I mean, most, not all, but most of your scenes are really intense together. It's not like, you're sitting around having a cup of tea or anything.
Yeah.
Your encounters are always really intense. Is there a kind of psychological aspect of you 2 working yourself up to those encounters when you're actually filming them?
I think it happens naturally, honestly, because our characters spend so much time kind of talking about each other and kind of orbiting around each other that when we get to those scenes, it's the tensions kind of naturally built in that way. And we never over prepare anything beforehand. We always kind of just come to the scene with what we both feel and experience, and don't really discuss it very much, and just kind of play with it within the moment. And it's it always feels like there is such a weight to it, but it's always, it's one of the most enjoyable parts about the show is people want to see these characters together, but there's such a fine line of when we do and when we don't and how much we allow that. So it's just a lot of.
Well, I'd like to, Sandra, can I bring you in on this? Because there's 2 scenes in particular in this series I'd like to talk to you about. One, we can call it the bus kiss headbutt scene. And then the very last episode and the final scene I'd like to kind of talk to you about. But first of all, the bus kiss headbutt scene. I am not an actor, but that struck me as quite a difficult scene to actually film on a bus while grappling with each other. What are your memories of that scene?
I think just the practicality, the physicality of shooting a fight sequence on a moving bus with a crew that's just crammed into half of the bus.
The downstairs, wasn't it?
Oh yeah. So
They
one,
blacked out the windows.
yes. So the entire, not the entire crew, a small group of the crew were all sitting downstairs. The monitor, the director, they're all there. And then upstairs, which is the camera department and the sound department, who are with us, moving with us. So just, you know, it's a challenge just physically to do it. And I will also add that I felt, I don't know how Jodie felt about this. I have an idea, but like when we got that scene, when we got that episode and heard about it, it was like, it was a real thrill. I felt it was right in the pocket of what our relationship is and what the type of real Villanelle Eve scene is like, which it has its own energy and its own spontaneity. And I think that scene covers the gamut of what happens in their relationship from the beginning of, like, you know, Villanelle kind of very almost arrogantly coming onto the bus thinking like she has it all sussed out. And then Eve, who's constantly in some ways surprising Villanelle, which is in so much what Villanelle really needs. And then she actually gets the affirmation that she wants. The difference between how Villanelle walks up onto the bus and then is left and watches the bus, her reaction is, you know, and then of course for Eve, on the other hand, is how she's in the phone trying to communicate with Nico, her husband, and then how she's kind of left, kind of shattered open. It was great to play that scene because it just covers their entire relationship at that moment, you know, and it's done primarily physically.
Yeah, that's amazing, because it's actually, that's the whole of the arc of almost series 3 in this one moment, isn't it?
Actually, I'd say mostly it's about season 1 and 2. And I would say the back half of 3 changes. So that's the only thing I would add to that.
Yeah, yeah. Suzanne, I want to bring you in as the writer here, because we just started talking about the kind of the arcs, because Eve starts off the series 3 a very, very different person from how she ends. So does Villanelle. And actually you could say also, although Carolyn is harder to crack in that way, she also changes too. When you were thinking about the writing of it, what was the arc that you wanted to take them on? Did you have a very specific idea?
Yeah, and actually in the writers' room, we really talked about that at the beginning. That was sort of, you know, where do we find them, and where do we want them to go emotionally? How do we see them being different by the end of the season? And then it's just about like working out the details, sort of how you get them to that point. And really with Eve, you know, I felt that there'd been such enormous acts of violence, both done to her and by her, in a short period of time, that we had to honor that, really. And, you know, that was one of the reasons I wanted a sort of time break between the end of season 2 and the beginning of season 3, because we just needed a minute for that to kind of, the consequence of that to really sit in. And so I felt with Eve, it was about, and Sandra and I discussed this actually at length, and it was really about, you know, there's almost a strength in the life she's chosen herself at the beginning. It doesn't materially look good, you know, on the surface it looks like she's living in a dump and, you know, she's working in this restaurant and everything's fallen to pieces. But I felt there was a sort of defiance in that choice, which was really that the world and the people she loved were safer actually by her removing herself from it. And then obviously through Kenny's death, it like forces her back into the world. And by the end of the season, there's an acceptance. The fight has changed. Whereas previously, I think we've seen in the first 2 seasons, she's really fighting something within herself. And that's in part to do with the relationship with Villanelle. So it was for Eve, that was very much kind of the arc we felt. And then with Villanelle, it's almost that in reverse. You know, Villanelle, I think, is someone who really believes she's in control. It's about control. And Phoebe would often say that when we talked about Villanelle. She was like, it's all about control for Villanelle. And the reality that when working for the 12, and even actually when not working for the 12, even in season 2, you can be given the money and the material goods, but actually she's not fully in control of her life, and the realization of that. What does that mean? You know, it's a gilded cage she's in, and the realization of that, and sort of in that realization wanting to take ownership of who she is and where she's from, and kind of really be her own person in that sense, and what that means. You know, her value to everyone is that she can kill, but actually what's the, you know, who is she to herself? And then with Carolyn, obviously after Kenny's death, it really felt like with that character, again, she's a woman who is very much in control, and we've seen that side of her. And I felt that her investigating Kenny's death was a way of Carolyn really feeling like she was in control of the grief somehow. And if she could find out what happened, she was somehow, you know, controlling what had happened to her through that loss. And in that final moment, in that final scene, the realization that he won't come back, it's not going to resolve what she's going through, and the sort of inner conflict of that grief. So they were really kind of very broadly sort of the arcs that we saw for those three this season. Okay,
Fiona, I'd like to talk to you about Carolyn actually, and then I want to go to the final scene. Just be warned, Jodie and Sandra. But Fiona, you have an amazing scene in this series where you're sitting in a Mercedes listening to classical music and basically say you're fine because you've got your sandwiches. And you're neither at work nor at home because you can't go to work, and home is not the place for Carolyn, even though we see Carolyn at home all the time. Do you have sympathy for the way that Carolyn deals with grief and extreme emotion?
I do. I think she's, you know, as Suzanne's saying, I mean, they're all, the building up of these characters, which has taken 3 seasons, they're all victims of their own past, you know, and Carolyn is absolutely a person who would never normally show any emotion at all. And the one vulnerable area she has was Kenny, and she knew it. She knew that was her vulnerable area. But it doesn't mean that she has direct access to weeping and wailing, because people don't, if they haven't done it all their lives.
Well, yes, and the contrast between her and Geraldine's make that very clear.
Yes, I mean, it's not that she chooses not to mourn, but I mean, all of us lose people in our families, and it causes great strife within families, actually, how people mourn people. Everybody does it their own way. And I know that in my family, when we've lost, you know, you wish so-and-so would be more emotional and that so-and-so is less emotional. But of course, everyone's having exactly the same experiences. Just some people are having it inside their hearts, and some people are having it in their tear ducts. But yeah. Carolyn is somebody who'd have it inside, I think.
Inside her hearts. Okay.
I also didn't know what Suzanne was up to. I didn't know how far Suzanne was going to take the story. That's the other truth of it.
So this, I mean, when you're filming, I mean, presumably you've seen all the script though, when you're filming, or are they keeping bits back?
But of course they change it.
How tricky of them.
Yeah.
I'm looking at you, Suzanne. You can't really tell, but I'm looking at you.
Yes, Suzanne.
Well, we don't change it on purpose necessarily, but yeah, the scripts come out as we're shooting, so it's sort of, you know, but there is that, you are, as we're going, you know.
That's the nature of television, you know what I mean, which presents its challenges as well, its benefits, because there's an immediacy that can come with the writing that you can't necessarily, you can't have to do that in a play, you know. But that is the nature of it. Yeah.
So you're not quite sure what's going to happen. Okay, look, so I need to talk to you, Jodie and Sandra, about the final scene. I've got to talk about that. Okay, so we have a kind of epic final episode. Sorry, you know, if you want to go la la la, go la la la. But the very final moment on the bridge, when they turn and walk away, there is an acknowledgement, I think, from Eve, that she has moved away from I mean, the quote is that, you know, I used to want to be like that, you know, have the family like the house, the chicken, and into another area. And there seems to be an acknowledgement with Villanelle, who has been in that other area very extremely, that she's not sure what's going to happen with that either. So they're coming closer, and yet they turn and walk away. Would you say that was an accurate analysis?
You know, if I can
Beautiful analysis.
if I can just speak to it, I'm going to disagree with the first analysis of Eve, because she's actually not saying that she's walking away from her family, that from the life and the chickens and you know what it is. She's saying that she is reflecting on a life that she used to have, that she understands now she can never have again. It's actually Villanelle who comes in with the question, is that really what you want?
Yeah.
You know, and Eve actually doesn't necessarily answer, but what you can tell is that she understands she cannot have that life again.
Yeah, it's gone
you
too
know,
far.
so it's gone too far, and the person who she has left really is Villanelle.
Yeah.
You know, and that's actually such a wonderful change. And you know, one of the real joys, I'd say, Jode, working with you, and I hope you feel the same way, is I feel Jodie and I find so much stuff in the immediacy of playing with each other, like so much stuff that with all, let's say, script work that you can do, or the analysis or the talking that you can do, there's something that I feel does happen between us when we're inhabiting these characters. And so even with that, it's how we are subtly playing with each other, and the discovery between the characters, that for something as, I think, philosophical and such a deep change in from the very beginning of, let's say, series 1 for Eve, that she had no idea that this is the journey that she was going to go on. But this moment on the bridge, which is so beautiful, being on a bridge over water halfway, you know, where we walk halfway apart, you know, is the fact that she realizes that she can never go back to that same life. And how she has had a complete hand in that journey. She has a complete hand in the violence, in the change, in the destruction that she has been a part of and has inflicted.
Yeah, she's not a kind of passive person. She is active within it.
She understands she is now.
And what about Villanelle? Because Villanelle says there is a way to walk away. I mean, she does, doesn't she, Jodie?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like she's learned so much this season, and I think actually a huge turning point and moment for me was the ballroom scene. Just before the final scene. Like I realized so much within shooting that. You know, I always get asked, what is it about Eve that, you know, what is it about Villanelle, they can't get away from each other? And it's not something I've always been able to like put my finger on, but there is such an acceptance with Eve that she has towards Villanelle that she doesn't get from anybody else. And I feel like that final episode just proves and shows the trajectory and the journey that these women have been on together, you know, how we see them interact in season 1 is just totally different now, and so transformative to how they are now. And I think the embrace, the stillness, the acceptance that she feels from Eve within that scene, I think Eve matures her in many ways, in a sense of, you know, when you think about season 2, when she's like, Villanelle's like, you're mine, you know, Eve's like a possession to her, and then you see this finale, and she's almost like, let it go, let's let it go, we walk away, it's this easy, like see what happens. I think it's so interesting, and I thought it felt very true to the characters. It felt very calm. I mean, it felt like we weren't trying to force anything. It just, yeah.
And that's also a very physical scene.
Yeah.
It's a very, very physical scene. Like, you know, we are holding each other. We are dancing. what you can't, which is such a wonderful thing about being an actor, when you're physically you are communicating so much in a touch that you'll never see on screen. Do you know what I mean? Except for hopefully in what the camera can capture on the face or in the gestalt of the body. But it is again another very physical scene.
And what do you think of the very final scene on the bridge when you walk away and you turn back and we are left in suspense? What do you think happens immediately afterwards? Who wants to answer that?
I mean, I feel like they both walk away. I think in that turning around is for Villanelle, she wants that confirmation to see Eve turning around and looking at her. I think initially, I think they both walk away. Who knows, season 4 as a whole, who knows what's going to happen. But I think in that moment, there is that turn, and I think they both walk away, and then who knows? But I think they walk away in that moment, and that sits as that moment.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the idea of family in Killing Eve, because obviously in this series, Villanelle goes back to see her family, and there's a big shift around that. But also we could talk about family in terms of Eve, we could talk about family in terms of Carolyn. And what I find interesting as a woman is that normally, or very often within a series, family is like the place of refuge. Oh, here we go. This is where you're embraced. And actually, for none of these women, that is not, I mean, it starts off perhaps with Eve, but then that changes. And it definitely isn't for Villanelle. And it's hard for Carolyn. And that's quite unusual. I mean, I'm aware this is a broad sweep of a kind of idea, but that's one of the things that I feel about Killing Eve. Do you want to talk a little bit about the amazing bit where Villanelle goes back to visit her family and the emotions that she goes through there, Jodie? I mean, I know you were good at dung throwing, but wasn't quite what you wanted.
I took that very seriously, by the way.
I was
determined not to embarrass myself in front of the crew for my bad throwing. Yeah, I mean, her family, is something that has always kind of been hinted at, her past, and I was never sure how we were gonna kind of delve into that. I mean, for me and working with Suzanne, it was just always important that the audience went on a journey with her. I never wanted to come at the episode and be like, oh well, we know what she's gonna do, she's gonna kill them. It was so important to me that I think she does have a desire to belong, like she really, really does. And I think hopefully, the audience feel those moments of where I think and there are moments where she does feel at home and she feels like these are the people who she belongs, she needs to be surrounded by, but that very quickly turns. I think a huge thing for me was the cast of the family was so wonderful, and that really helped kind of like create that life and helped me kind of imagine and realize the life that she possibly could have led. And we wanted to. It's a fine line. You want to show her past, but you don't want to. Everyone always speaks about her mystery, and of course we want to keep the mystery, but then it's important for me as an actor, and I think as the show, that we continue to grow these characters and introduce new things and surroundings and have them learn different lessons. And I think that family episode really provided that for Villanelle as a character.
What was it like to write, Suzanne? Because that's a very important episode, isn't it?
Yeah, it was one of those things, like in the writer's room, like day 2, I was like, okay, in episode 5, Villanelle will go home and we'll do a family episode, boom. And then when I actually came to write it, I was like, well, what have I done? It was, the challenge of it, obviously, then the reality of that. But Emerald at the end of season 2, from a writer's perspective, gave such a gift in that like one line of dialogue in the final episode where Villanelle says to Constantine, my family's dead, and he says most of them. And that's just like, you can't ignore that. I was like, oh, this is just too good a gift to be given. So I always knew, and I even pitched, like in my very early meetings with Sir Gentle, I was like, we've got to do something with that in this season. But yeah, it was, as Jodie said, you know, it was really important. We were very lucky to have an amazing director, Shannon Murphy. And I met with her. I'd written a very, very early draft. And there was lots of discussion, as Jodie says, like, does she know what she's doing? You know, does she go there with the aim to kill everyone, or does she not? And we both felt, you know, it's got to be an exploration. Otherwise, there's the sort of the mystery of that story in itself. Even though there is an inevitability to it, there's got to be a moment where Villanelle herself believes that she could stay there. And so, yeah, it was just, I mean, writing that Elton John song moment, I wrote that and I thought, oh, I'm never going to, like, I put it in the first draft, I thought, I'm never going to be allowed to do this. They're going to tell me it's like insane. We're never going to get the song. But I'm just going to put it in. I'm just going to indulge myself in the madness of what this is. And it's one of those things, I'm still astounded that it's actually on film, that it actually happened. And again, Shannon and the cast, I mean, Jodie obviously was a phenomenal performance in that episode, just brought it to life in ways that I couldn't have imagined. It was, yeah.
And referring back to my kind of initial slightly waffly idea about family, do you think that that's in, you know, it's obviously something that runs through the whole of the series, but it isn't, they're not very comfortable with family, these women, are they?
No, and I think, I mean, family is something as a writer I often explore. I don't think, I mean, this is all subconscious, but I don't think it's a coincidence that family features a lot this season, because that is a theme that I often write about, because I feel that actually you don't get to choose those relationships, they're forced upon you. And so there's something in that means it kind of forces the characters to face people and situations that they wouldn't normally choose to. And that always feels very rich. And I think what's so great about the show, and the reason it's been so embraced, and sort of what Phoebe created with these female characters initially, is just the complexities and the flaws that, you know, these women are all brilliant at what they do, and yet not brilliant at other elements of their lives. And that's, I don't think, represented often on TV. And that's just always a pleasure to write.
Yeah. I just want to also throw in that one of the things I love about the whole series is that when children are involved, you don't necessarily feel that they're safe, which you normally feel in any, you know, in any series. Pretty much you think, oh, there's a kid, they'll be all right. And, you know, a baby ends up in a bin, you know, in this series, which was one of my highlights. And I speak, darlings, as a mother and a grandmother. But, you know, I got the baby in the bin.
I tried to steal that off Dasher. Do you remember, Suzanne?
Yes.
I was like, do you think Villanelle would put the baby in the bin? I was like so jealous.
Harriet didn't want to. Yeah, Harriet was like, no.
I was like, okay.
We all want to put the baby in the bin.
Yeah.
I was on set in. I actually pitched that to my sister. I didn't give her the context of it, but I just said, I've written something, you know, well, Laura had written the script, but we pitched it in the room, and I loved the idea. I was just like, listen, we have to do it. And I said, you know, we've put something in, a baby gets put in a bin, and the look of horror on my sister's face. And I thought, oh God, no, like I'm going to, like, it's going to be a disaster. And then when we shot it in Barcelona, I just thought, I had a panic attack, because I just thought, is it going to, but it still remains one of my favorite moments. So what can I say?
It's absolutely great. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the idea of chaos. You know, there's chaos, and I want to talk a little bit about Eve's chaos, because Eve, you know, we think of Villanelle as the agent of chaos. She has been called this, but Eve has left her family, in particular poor old Nico, in a bit of a state. Do you feel, Sandra, that Eve is as much of an agent of chaos now as Villanelle?
Well, I think that's the moment on the bridge. Going back to that moment is the realization that she has been an agent of chaos in her own life. So I'd say, yes, I agree. So, yes, I
think
agree.
She likes it.
Yeah. Does she like it? I think I think there's a certain exhilaration when you, not talking specifically about stomping on someone and killing them, but when one comes into the notion, the reality of their own power, and then also the responsibility of their own power, it's very affecting. And I feel you're able to see that in even real time. Like you're able to see her make mistakes, and you can see that she can't tell. Like she can't tell it. You know what I mean? And it's only sometimes, you know, a series later where you can suddenly see the penny dropping. But there is an overarching theme about chaos that I think I'm very interested in the series, which has a lot to do with the mystery of the 12. And, you know, each of these women are involved in chaos, not involved in perpetrating it, like how Villanelle's job was at the very beginning, you know, in trying to dismantle it. That we see that, say, Carolyn is a part of a system to do, but we also see how Carolyn in her system is also a deep part of perpetrating the chaos. And then you see it from a much more kind of personal point of view from Eve, because you can see the chaos within her own heart and how she inflicts it on the people around her.
There's also, Fiona, with Carolyn, there's a sense, you know, she tries to be very truthful. She says to her daughter, I'm telling you the truth. And yet actually, of course, she rarely tells the truth in her work. You know, she's always keeping bits back. And that is always also going to lead to a kind of chaotic life. She's naturally, I think, almost like Eve, very truthful. All three of the characters are very blunt and impatient. But Carolyn in particular is keeping stuff back all the time, isn't she?
Yes, and of course Carolyn is the person who has 2 adult children who she's damaged roundly over the years, because there was a drink that that Eve and Carolyn have in season 1 where they talk about chaos, it's really like Yeats's idea of the hearth and the heart. You know, you go where your heart takes you, and Eve is talented, like Villanelle is talented, and it takes them beyond the hearth. You don't want to stay at home by the fire and be a good parent. You want to live. It's about excitement, adventure, and it makes you a disastrous person on the domestic front. And I think Carolyn is a disastrous mother. You know.
I know, but when I look at her house, I think, well, it's a nice hearth, but you know.
It is, but she never wants to be in it, not really.
No, she seems to be a little resentful despite its beautiful minimalist lines.
Yes, and actually I was surprised at how much we used it this season. And I think it's what Suzanne said. I think Suzanne, you know, really raised the curtain and we looked behind the scenes, because normally, I mean, Carolyn just arrives out of a hot air balloon and just lands in an office and tells people what to do. And suddenly Suzanne insisted, you know, which is a really almost you know, her love of the theatre and you know, we really saw the rounded part of the characters this season because she insisted on it. It was wonderful to have Karen forced to be at home. I think it was very interesting.
Very, very true. Okay, Jodie, I've got one more question for you, and then I'm going to go to, I've got lists of questions from that people have sent in. And what it is, you know, these days, women are quite often told to be role models. You know, if you're here, you know, you have to be a role model for one and all. And in what ways do you think that Villanelle is a role model? Because I think we could argue that she is.
I think
to a certain extent. Good. Let's say why.
For me, it's so easy. I think it's like her freedom of expression. I think she is so herself. Like she wears what she wants. She expresses herself in that way. You said she says what she thinks when she thinks it, and she has very little fear in that sense. You know, this season's a little bit different. I think the thing that she is most fearful of actually is herself. But in regards to the outside world and you know, people's perceptions of her, I think she is quite immune to that in a lot of ways. And I really respect that, because I think we are so instilled with fear, especially now in this climate, and she doesn't have it, and I think it's very powerful. I think that's a very powerful thing to hold. So yeah, I think I would say that.
Do you use it yourself? I mean, do you ever think, what would Villanelle do, other than obviously not killing somebody?
No, but I do think it's, you know, without sounding like a silly actor, it's like, I think some things do seep into your life in that way, and I think I found a lot of freedom in playing her in regards to, like, you know, when we started season 1 and feeling kind of out of my depth, and you know, coming onto set and sometimes doing these kind of outrageous scenes, or just having to dare yourself to push things in a certain way and not feeling embarrassed about being in a room full of people, and you know, that kind of thing. I think it really helped me kind of knock those walls down and kind of dare a little bit more, I think, is what she's kind of instilled in me.
Yeah, walk into a room like Villanelle, just don't kill people, would be my advice.
Shop till you drop.
There is that too. Okay, I'm going to go to, I've got some questions here, which I'm going to ask you. Okay, so this is from Claudia on Twitter, and she says, Killing Eve has extraordinary power when it comes to female visibility. How do you feel as actresses and women for having, well, it's kind of what we talked about a little bit, responsibility and power to change the perspective on women on TV? So do you feel that that the show has had the power to change the perspective of women being on television? Who wants to take that? You can wave at me. Go on, Fiona.
Well, I would just say, you know, I've been around a long time, and it is true. I'm very glad if it's changed the perspective. What it's really done is just allowed actresses to play a pendulum swing that is much wider than the normal pendulum swing of playing the vicar's wife or the daughter or the sad mother. Suddenly, the contradictions that are in absolutely everybody in all our lives are explored and celebrated, and it's a relief, actually. And I think it's very interesting that, you know, Jodie says that some of herself has bled into Villanelle, apart from the murdering, and that of course a story has to have a story, but it's been the confusion that Sandra plays so brilliantly in as Eve. You know, this confusion of being into your marriage, meant to be settled and not settled, is so many people's experience. And in a way, in that way, the show is very compassionate about people, I think.
Yeah, that's true. What about you, Sandra? I mean, it's you know, do you feel that the show has changed the idea of women on TV? Have you got a sense of that?
Well, that's really not up to me to say. It's about the viewers to say whether that's what they've received. Going on with what Fiona was saying about the perspective of an actor, though, that has changed, because the three of us are here being able to talk about a show that is basically about these three characters. So that is actual factual change, because we're all on a magical Zoom call, you know. So that I do feel is a difference, is a change. Of course, our writer, who is a fellow woman, and I don't know how everyone else is feeling, but like I can feel, you know, from, let's say, in the States, where you have a lot of let's say actresses who have a lot of more power, someone like Reese Witherspoon or Kerry Washington or Nicole Kidman, you know, that the way that they are using their platform and their power to continue telling stories about female characters, that you can actually see on screen. And that's a really wonderful, tangible thing to be able to point to.
I also think as well, I would say that, like, when I'm approaching a role, the responsibility isn't something I could or would always think about initially, you know, because I think it's such an out of body thought. But then when you do something and you have that response, it's always nice to know that you are all collectively moving in that direction. But it's not something, the responsibility is something I don't think I can think of. Otherwise my head would pop off.
Yeah, it would explode. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Right, we've got this one here, which is Sasha on Twitter. And Sasha says, who do you think would be a dream guest star? Which is quite a hard question.
Oh, I got it.
Oh, Sandra's got one. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The dream guest star for Killing Eve is Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Yeah.
Of course.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It would be amazing if somehow she came on as some character. I don't know what that would be. Who would be willing to write that? But I think that would just be so meta.
Yeah, the leader of the 12, perhaps. Okay. Okay. We've got one here, which is Maggie on Twitter. And this is a question for you, Fiona. How has the role of Carolyn challenged you as an actress, and what have you learned from her? We've touched this a little bit, but what would you say, other than the power of a really great coat? What have you learned from Carolyn?
Well, I want to add to the previous question, just say Idris Elba is who I'd love to have working for me.
Also fine.
But yes,
noted.
The power of a good coat. Yes, the clothes are magnificent, and I never thought that. I thought that the people who worked in MI6 that we wear very functional, rather low grade clothes, but that has changed, and it's changed me actually, because you do see that sort of 80s, 90s student dress that we all, as actors, felt was all right. It isn't. It's much better to be well dressed. I've learned that. But as a character, I think I admire Carolyn, who's not at all like me, is that she is someone who you feel you could trust with taking in your thought, really taking it in. She listens very well, and it's made me listen better.
That's great. Okay. And okay, Molly on Facebook says, what is something that you guys as cast members would love to see your characters do in the coming season? So that's quite hard.
It's really hard. And honestly, I don't know about you guys, but I rely so much on the writers for that. Like I feel like I always come back each season with an idea of what I don't want. And then I like to see what they run with and what they create. Because for me, that's what is really enjoyable about this whole process is, you know, a lot of times you finish a season, you're like, where are we going to go from here? And then lo and behold, you know, there is 8 episodes of wonderfulness that they come up with. So yeah, that's a tricky question. I mean, you guys might have a clear idea of where you want to go. I don't know.
Did anybody?
I would love Eve to look great and wear great clothes. Never. Can she? There was a moment. In
you look great though.
But I gotta tell you, after that, she was attacked. So
yeah, you could have fewer beanies and parkas and perhaps something a bit more zhizhy. Okay, and oh yeah, this is a really quick one for you, Jodie. Neve on Twitter wants to know if you think that Villanelle will ever use a Scouse accent on the show while you're in disguise.
Neve, never. We actually, season 2, it got written in one episode and I asked them to take it out because it just seemed too gimmicky for me. I was like, we know she does accents, but Scouse felt a little bit too much of a far stretch for me. So I
on the nose. It's a bit too on the nose.
Yeah, it felt a bit too, like, you know, kind of wink wink to camera. So no, I'm afraid not. Scouse will not be making an appearance on Killing Eve.
Sorry.
Hopefully I won't slip into Scouse at any point. That's the aim.
Okay, there's a question from Laura on Twitter, and hers is about music actually. So the dancing scene, was the music that was played, was that in the show that we see? Is that the music that was actually played?
It was. It was. We had it on the scene, and it created such a gorgeous atmosphere. Like, I remember walking into the set, and the essays were practicing their kind of dance, you know, to see where they would be fit around us, and the music was on, and it was like so overwhelming. I don't know, I had like took a deep breath when we went in there. It felt, yeah, it was a pivotal moment in the story, and it just felt so cathartic. I don't know, it was really lovely, and it was nice to have it as well for our rhythm. Well,
Yeah,
my lack of rhythm.
Right.
Yeah, to keep up with the beats.
And I've got a music question. What is Villanelle listening to when she leaves her family scene, and she's sitting on the train in her slightly overdone denim?
Yeah, we actually had speakers, and we played Crocodile Rock.
I was hoping it was Crocodile Rock.
Yeah,
oh,
yeah. It felt right. I mean, that's what she would have definitely been listening to. So, yeah, we kind of blasted that on the train.
Okay, great. Okay, I have a couple here, which is when you just mentioned something before, Jodie, which I thought was quite interesting, which is where you said that you know where you don't want your character to go.
Mm-hmm.
So what have you said in the past, and what would you say about season 4? And that's to all of you. Where would you not want her to go?
I think for me, it's just important that she evolves. You know, I feel like what was flashy and surprising about season 1 over time, you know, it wears, and people get used to it, and they expect, you know, what's coming, and actually now what is most surprising is, you know, for instance, like, you know, Villanelle letting the little boy live and letting him go see Elton John. Like, you know, that would never be surprising at one stage. So I think it's just navigating that, and you know, and the kind of opulence and the wealth and the clothes were so important to her at the beginning, and now I feel like her priorities are shifting in different ways, or at least her focus is in a different direction. And I just like that with each season we kind of rain check and go over it and just listen to what it is that the characters are actually saying, and you know, and make sure we pick up from there and continue on to the next chapter.
Okay. I mean, we've mentioned clothes, Sandra, but is there anywhere that you don't want Eve to go? Presumably back to a chicken. I don't presume she wants to go back there.
No,
I'm desperate for keeping her out from the chicken.
You know, I actually going to add to what Jodie is saying. You know, when these are all kind of intricate, nuanced performances that are coming from very, very like deep emotional landscapes. The thing that I know that myself, and I think Jodie as well, is just to not go backwards. Meaning is not to tread territory that we've already explored, because we're always wanting to move the characters or grow the characters. I don't want to say forward, but just to continually growing the characters. So, but
Yeah.
then that, you know, that really gives the writers such a interesting challenge, you know, because it's like, okay, now, before there was, you know, a cat and cat or cat and mouse or cat and cat kind of dynamic. Now that in some ways at the very end, at the bridge, I feel like they turn to each other and understand like each other is the only one that they can really trust. Mm-hmm. Where you then go emotionally and character-wise from there is very, very exciting. That's where I know I do want them to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Suzanne, you have to unmute yourself for that one. Any thoughts about series 4?
Well, you know, I know the position Laura is in right now, so I would never want to add to the noise of her trying to, you know, distill what she's doing. I will say, I mean, obviously, you know, Laura Neal, who's doing season 4, she wrote on season 3, and she's brilliant and hilarious, and yeah, she's got like the most amazing imagination and mind. So it'll be unsurprising, you know, whatever comes will be like, I don't mean unsurprising, I mean like it'll be vivid and wild and crazy and surprising, whatever she comes up with. But I just think the challenge that any writer has in that position is just that you remain true to the world and the characters, and yet you take it somewhere new, and that involves taking risks, which is scary because, you know, people know what they like about the show and what they love, and when you try new things, you know, that involves risk. But actually, sort of alluding to what Jodie's saying as well, you know, like Villanelle and evolving that, the things that people kind of associate with her, you just can't tread water. And I think that's what the show has done so well, and I know in Laura's hands will continue to do, is just, you know, break new ground with the characters. So that's what's exciting about going forward. But it's, you know, that is the challenge of the job, really. Yeah,
it's great. Okay, so look, I have because we're coming up to the end of our lovely chat, I would like to ask you all, can you give us a favourite moment, and this is all four of you, just a favourite moment from the last series, either on screen or in filming, or just a moment that you remembered and enjoyed? Who wants to go first?
I will.
Sandra does.
There's a moment when we were shooting the bus scene, and it's a fight. Jodie, you know what I'm talking to say. It's yeah. So it's like, so Eve is so taken with seeing Villanelle that she goes forward and attacks her. And so, you know, Jodie and I are going through fight moves that, you know, we have our choreographer or fight stunt coordinator there to teach us. And so we're going.
This was a take though, right? When this happened? Yeah, it was.
They didn't use it, but you know, they probably cut the sound out. And so, but there was this one moment where I actually connected with Jodie. Like, I connected with her body, not in a terrible way at all, but I connected with her. And I said, I think I said, "Oh, sorry."
Yeah.
Like, you know, in the midst of like fighting, right? And it squeaked out this like, "Oh, sorry." And then we continued on with this scene. And I remember Jodie afterwards, you were like, that was the most Eve thing possible.
Yeah, I wish they would have kept it, because it was just genius. It was like, she hit me and then she like came back and she was like, "I'm sorry," and then like carried on.
And then carried on.
But it was so Eve.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
What about you, Jodie? What's your favourite moment from the last series?
I think a really enjoyable moment for me was working with Shannon Murphy as the director of Block 5 and 6. I think because, like Suzanne was saying, it was such a delicate episode, and as we all know, that every person brings their own energy, but a director kind of sets the tone for the two episodes, and she kind of came in and just really encouraged me in a way, and which I think I really needed for kind of that episode, and that was a really enjoyable experience for me. Like, we were in Romania for 2 weeks, I think, in the middle of the mountains, which was beautiful and very surreal, but it was very kind of immersive, and it was a very fun experience.
Okay, great.
I also love, my favorite moment from the show though is the bath scene with Fiona and Sandra. That's my favorite moment from this season.
Yeah, meetings wherever you like.
Yeah, so good.
What about you, Fiona? What's your favorite moment?
I think my favorite moment was I was in the bath, and it was a very deep bath. They had to keep on putting water in. And I thought it was very Carolyn that at the end I asked for a towel and that I would just stand up. So I stood up and I was naked. And the whole camera crew nearly fell off their cameras. I was really hoping they'd keep it in. I don't mean in a rude way, but that they would just get the whole, you know, they nearly died. And that was very good.
Thumbs. And what about you, Suzanne? I mean, given, you know, this is a challenge, you were given the, you know, the challenge of the whole of the series 3. I can't imagine what you felt like at the beginning, and now it's at the end. What was your favourite moment?
it's so hard. It's like choosing your favorite child. You know, you kind of, there's so many you love for different reasons. I mean, there are moments that I have to say the bus scene actually is one of those very rare moments where it's exactly as I imagined it. And that doesn't happen. I mean, often it's like better or just different, but like when I saw it, I was like, it was as if my brain had been put on the screen, the energy of it. You know, there's detail obviously that they worked out that was different, but just the energy of that scene, I was as exciting as it kind of, you know, when we were thinking it up. And yeah, I actually, I'm picking loads now, so, but just the poignancy of Eve and Kenny's last scene, there was something in that, you know, obviously no one knows it's their last moment together, but there was something in that I thought was so moving. And Carolyn and Kenny's last scene, actually, both of those were just so moving to me. Yeah.
Can I just say as well, Sandra, remember when we did this scene with all of us? We shot it for like 2 days in Paul's house. And me and you were sat on the sofa and we were watching Fiona and Kim.
We were watching their play. We were watching Fiona and Kim play for like a day.
For days.
We were like, they're really good at this. It was so good. Just watching them act. That was a great memory as well.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, you two sat together like slightly like naughty schoolgirls off to the side. Well, you got on with the business of just blowing people away, you know?
Yeah.
You know how it is, Fiona?
They were a nightmare on the sofa, the two of them. They just kept on commenting and sort of
somehow we knew.
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to say we've got to come to the end of our lovely chat, but I would really like to say it's been a really great way to spend an early Friday evening. I know it's not quite like that for you, Sandra, but I mean, fantastic. You know, lockdown can be pretty rubbish, but this was really great. And I'd like to say thank you to everybody who tuned in. You're all across the world on Zoom and on Facebook. We really appreciate it that you're here. And obviously we'll all be tuning into the next Killing Eve when it happens. But thank you all for bringing such a great series and such great characters to us all, because we really love them. Baby in the bin, killing people, standing up naked, standing on bridges. We love you all. We love your characters. Thank you so much. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you, Sandra, Fiona, and Jodie.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.